Welcome to Stitchery Stories, where textile artists share their life in fabric and thread, inspiration, techniques, disasters and delights. And I'm Susan Reeks, enthusiastic embroiderer and textile art dabbler who also loves podcasting. So take a break and enjoy our light-hearted chat, and please share with your friends so they can enjoy it too.
Hello, hello. Announcing Stitchery Courses, a brilliant new place to easily find experts who teach classes and courses in all things using thread, fabric and yarn. Covering mostly topics around embroidery and textile art at the moment, but this list will keep growing as I extend the reach and grow Stitchery Courses. Simply visit stitcherycourses.com and browse or search the fabulous teachers who are already listed. Check out their profile and information. It's easy to message them on the platform or click through to their website and you book and buy a class or a course or a workshop directly with them. You can also keep up to date with info and offers from all the experts through the newsletter, and also watch out for the fabulous supplier guide, which is coming soon. And if you teach your art, craft or skills with thread, fabric and yarn, then don't miss out and come and get listed on Stitchery Courses and attract new people into your business. stitcherycourses.com. I'll see you over there. Hello and welcome today to our lovely guest, Jack Roberts. Hi, Jack.
Hi, Sue.
Right, it's brilliant to have you here, Jack, and I've got lots of really nosy questions to talk to you about, and I've been really looking forward to speaking to you today, so welcome to Stitchery Stories.
Thank you for having me.
Big pleasure. Before we get started, I've got Jack's bio here. Dr. Jack Roberts, also known as JPR Stitch, is a fine artist whose primary medium is freehand machine embroidery. His art is formed from simple, organic, flowing, abstract shapes, but is constructed from a dense and complex web of stitch. His stitchings are a reflection of the calmness, tranquility, and contentedness that he feels when sitting at the sewing machine and creating. Sewing is his meditation. Well, I love that bio, Jack. Thank you. It's in itself is calm and simple as well.
Thank you very much.
Communicating well there in stitch and in words, I think. But I also just want to sneak in, and we'll come back to this, that Jack has, as well as his stitch practice over the years, has really immersed himself in the art world. So that's part of Jack's story. So we'll come back to that. Quite the art career person as well, I think we're safe to say.
Lots of stuff going on.
Yes, absolutely. We're not going to be stuck for anything to talk about today, that's for sure. Right then, so Jack, before we get too far down in my waffle at the start, all of your links and things will be on your episode of Stitchery Stories, but Instagram is your main place, isn't it?
It sure is.
Where you hang out and you're very good and you post all the
Slightly
time.
obsessed with it.
Right then, Jack. So would you like to share with us what you're working on and what's got you excited?
Well, I've been working on some daily stitch drawings for a while, which are a small artworks there, and they're part of my practice that I started about November last year.
Mm-hmm.
And it was almost an antidote to some of my stitchings take such a long time to make. So a collection piece, which is a big artwork, can take 4 months to sew. And when you're in that middle of a project, the end seems so far away. So I wanted to find, and it just becomes, you just can't see out of it somehow. So I wanted to find a way of doing a small project every day where I could start something, have the creative journey and have the end goal at the end output every single day. So I started little stitchings. They're 10 centimeters by 15 centimeters, and I call them my daily stitch drawings. I started in November. I do one every day, and I've done one every day, including Christmas Day, for the last few months. It's a kind of a core part of my daily practice. And what I've been doing recently is finding a way to display them. So I've been thinking, when I started the project, it wasn't about displaying them. It wasn't about sharing them. It was just about me finding a way to kind of motivate myself within these long projects. Anyway, as time goes on, your mind changes. And I then tried to think of ways to display them, and they're a tricky thing to display because I wanted to show the daily aspect of them. But then grids are great, but number 7 as a week doesn't fit into a grid very well. Every month has got a different number of days in it, so then putting them into grids. So it kind of got a bit confusing of how do I show all of the art, all of the daily stitch drawings. And then I've kind of come to the conclusion of time is really important to the project. So showing that movement of time.
Yes, because it's a daily thing. So yeah, that's the common thread, I suppose, all the way through into you're doing something every day. Right.
It is, and that kind of passing of time. So I've then looked at different ways, and I found 2 ways, and I feel really excited by both of them. Actually, one is a calendar mechanism of displaying them, where it's a grid that follows the calendar grid. So the start of it might be offset by a couple of days, and they're 7 columns wide, and that works really well to kind of represent a month and the passing of time. But then I've also come up with towers of stitch, which sounds a bit random.
Everybody, there's one of the images that Jack's shared with me is his towers of stitch, and also shows this idea of calendar format. So, you know, when we look at a calendar, it'll like start on a Monday, or sometimes it'll start on a Wednesday or whatever. So, yes, I think they're really great, fascinating. So you can see that on some of Jack's images. So your towers of stitch, how did you come up with that idea then?
I wanted to take my art off the wall for a while, but I've never really found a way of doing it. And this kind of worked really well. So I tried to create a 7-sided shape, and I did that. So I created a heptagon.
Heptagon, that's it. I was trying to think what the name of it.
Yeah, so 7 daily stitchings come together to create these heptagons. So then that represents a week. A heptagon is then stacked on top of another and another and another. So 4 of them will represent a month, 8 of them 2 months. And it's these towers that the time kind of spins around and loops around them. And each week, each layer is a week, each stack is a month, and they can walk around them. You can find certain dates on them so that you can kind of plot where certain things happened, and they've just become a really interesting way of displaying my stitchings in a way that both shows off the individual stitching, that you can get really up close to each stitching and you can see the thread, the looping of the thread, the patterns of each one. But then you can actually also stand back and appreciate that it is a daily practice, that the daily practice is important on each day. It builds every week, it builds every month, and over time it creates these impressive kind of structures and habits within your life. So I'm really excited by it.
Yeah, I'm not surprised. It's when you look at it, it looks like, all right, yeah, it's some, stitching piled up. But what I hadn't appreciated was the fact that you've made these heptagons. In fact, actually, are they not 9-sided? Because have you got a top and a bottom? Have you got 7 sides and a top and a bottom to make 9?
No,
am I overcomplicating this?
You're overcomplicating it far too much. Yeah, they are. It's just 7 sides with it. So there's a kind of a hole that runs through the middle of the towers, which is quite nice, because I think that there's something quite nice about the towers being hollow. That the whole structures are only supported by themselves. So if you miss a day, the towers wouldn't stand up because they're not self-supporting each other. So that it almost emphasizes that daily practice and the importance of the daily practice to the project.
Yeah, that's what I was wondering. I love to know how things work and how things fit together and patterns and things. So I was immediately my brain's going off. Well, how's that? So yeah, brilliant. I like that.
It was a bit of an engineering project.
Yes, that's what I was wondering. Yeah, I really love that. And I think you've come up with a really graphical way of expressing time.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely, and it captures time. But I think each individual stitching captures is this kind of the start and the finish every day, and that experience of sewing every day and that daily practice. But then the way they're displayed represents that movement of time and how you change over time, but how that kind of progression is important and that build up is important.
I find that absolutely fascinating, to be honest. Now, Oh, I've got that many questions buzzing around in my head now. Let me get my thoughts organised. Right, so here's a question. So you've been doing this like every day now since November, October, whenever last year. So you haven't missed a day. If you do miss a day, what are you going to do? Are you going to have a blank one? Or are you going to pretend that you didn't miss a day and just carry on?
I don't know. I think there's potential problems that often need solutions on the horizon. So holidays are something that needs thinking through. So in the last few months, if I've been away for a couple of days, I've either done the stitching before I've gone or when I've come back, or I've taken my sewing machine with me.
Well, that's the other thing, because it's like sewing machines are not the most portable of damn things either. So, I'm off to Tenerife and here's my sewing machine. It's not really going to work, is it?
The project actually started when I was in Tenerife on holiday. That was
such a random comment.
But it started that I was on holiday. I wasn't doing my daily stitching and I really missed it. And all I'd got was a pen and a paper. And I kind of started doing these doodles with my zigzag pattern. It was just a pen and paper. And the piece of paper was 10 centimeters by 15 centimeters.
Like a postcard, isn't it? Yeah.
Yeah, it is. And then that's where the whole thing kind of came from. So then if I do go away, actually doing a pen and ink version of the daily stitch drawing is still part of it. It's still me doing that daily practice. It's just drawing with pen and pencil rather than drawing with
exactly. And I suppose if you backed it on something, you could still incorporate it into your towers.
Yeah, absolutely.
There we are. There's that problem solved then between us. Oh, I love that. Yeah. Now the other thing, when you look at the images, you can see the progression of the style of stitching as from when you first started is a lot denser, and then as you go through the months, there's more space in there, more kind of spidery bits. Yeah, has that just happened? Did you design that, or has it just happened?
No, it's just happened very naturally. I think when I started the project, it was a progression from my other stitching style, which is very heavy, very dense, where you can't see any base fabric at all.
Yeah.
So then actually starting something where I'm actually letting the base fabric show through was a totally new step. So it took a while to get used to that. And then I'm thinking through these ideas as I'm sewing. And then as time goes on, I'm becoming more relaxed with the project. I'm becoming more relaxed with what the project's trying to achieve.
Yeah.
So then I'm just switching off in the moment and I'm just sewing. So rather than the art being me thinking while I'm making the art, it becomes a lot more free flowing, a lot more organic, and it kind of represents much more how I'm feeling in that moment. So if I'm calm, I think the shapes are a lot more a lot smoother. If I'm a bit more stressed, they're a bit spikier. So I think they become a bit more of a reflection of me in that moment while I'm sewing.
Now, and can you, if you look back, can you tell, or does it remind you where you think, do you know, I was having a really bad day that day? Can you tell that?
I can tell.
Yeah,
I can tell, and I suppose other people might be able to tell as well. But I can tell days that just weren't feeling particularly balanced. So within my practice, finding balance within my artwork is really important, because my practice helps me to find balance and calmness and tranquility in my life, and I want that to be reflected within the art. So I can tell with the daily stitchings, the ones where I felt particularly balanced while I was doing it, and the ones where I was perhaps a little bit unbalanced while I was doing it. But with the daily stitchings, however they come out, that's how they end up. Whereas with my other stitchings, I'll continue working them and reworking them until they feel balanced, so that they always feel balanced. Whereas these ones actually show a bit of that unbalanced feeling as well, which is good.
Right. Yeah. You're finding balance in the unbalancedness of being balanced.
That's it. It's all about being balanced in an unbalanced world.
Which is exactly what our daily struggles are usually. Right.
Indeed.
Right, crikey. So really this idea of what you're working on and what's got you excited, it's not just a one thing, and it's not particularly a project. This is something that you've really started off in earnest.
Yeah, it's a development within my practice. It's a new output within my practice, which took a while to feel comfortable, for me to feel comfortable with, and then it's taken even longer for me to actually find a way that I feel happy with how it's displayed. And I was racking my brain for such a long time trying to find ways of displaying them, because there was always the question of, do I display them in the order they were created? Or do I mix them up and then create patterns so that actually the heavier stitched ones all come to one side, the lighter stitched ones go to another side, so that I create patterns with how I display them. But then that didn't seem to reflect that daily aspect.
No, I'm going to say then that's like getting a jigsaw, isn't it? And just
It is.
throwing the bits into a heap. It's not a jigsaw anymore. Yeah. No, I can totally understand sticking with that. It's a daily practice. Let's display them in that daily order, because that daily order has importance. As we've already just said, you can track. You can track, and if we looked at it, we could probably see as well. You can track what was going on with those ideas. So, I'm really pleased you stuck with that daily order. Now, trying to do something every day, as simple as it might be, I think is a massive challenge for most people. And it's not just stitching, is it? It's exercise, diet, work, posting on Instagram, marketing your business, you name it. Doing it every day is bloody hard, isn't it? How have you got over that, Jack?
Stubbornness, I think. Absolute stubbornness. No, it is really hard, but I think daily practice is an important part of my artistic identity. And I think that the way it came about was as a way for me to prioritize my practice. That as you said in the beginning, and I'm sure as we'll come to talk on, I've done lots of things within the art world that ate up my time, took a lot of my energy, and my artistic practice was always pushed to the back, and I never really gave it the attention it needed. And daily practice became the solution to that actually, if I started sewing, so when I decided I was going to dedicate my time to my practice, I decided I need to stitch every day, because if I stitch every day, I'll begin to prioritize it. I'll begin to own it. I'll give myself to my practice. And so I did that. And I still do stitch every day. And then after a while, it was kind of like, this is great, but I need to get my art out there. So then it was like, social media. I hate social media. I don't want to share anything. I don't want to tell anyone about my life and all of this. Then it was like, no, just embrace it. Well, how do I embrace it? Well, I've got to post every day. So use it as a daily diary and share something every day. So then daily practice is a way that is a tool that I used for me to prioritize my practice. It's then developed into that a core aspect of my practice. So it's now, I've been posting every day on Instagram for nearly 3 years. I've been sewing every day for probably even longer than 3 years, other than the occasional holiday. And now I'm doing these daily stitch drawings every day. So it's a big part of my practice. And I think there are times when it feels hard to do that daily practice, but I started off really stubbornly that no, I've just got to keep doing it. Whereas now having done it for such a long time, I'm a big believer that you've got to keep forcing yourself to do it, because as soon as you stop, it's easy for you to other things to creep in. Then missing a day, you've missed a week turns into a month, and then
that is
it's no longer a priority.
True.
And even if I just sit down at the sewing machine working on a project that I'm do a couple of minutes of stitching, actually I've spent the time that day doing something. I feel like I've spent some time doing it. I've thought about my art. So even those busy days where you really don't feel like it, it's still important to do it. But it's not easy.
No, it's like so many simple things. It's simple, but it's not easy to actually do it. And I mean, there's all these studies, isn't there, about how long it takes to build a habit. And it's a lot longer than I think originally what they thought. It is significant, the amount of time it takes to build a habit. And it's frighteningly quick how quickly you can get out of that habit, and particularly in things like exercise. If you
Yes.
haven't gone running for like 5 days or something, it's very easy to not go on the 6th day, and then a week, as you say, a week's gone, then it's like, oh crikey, I haven't been for 3 weeks,
Yeah.
etc.
It is.
I've got a hurt leg at the minute, so it's like, I can't go.
I know. I've tried daily practice in other things
Yeah.
and failed at it. So
Really?
I have, yeah. And I think that belief is a big part of it. So I decided a couple of years ago I wanted to do some yoga every day. So I thought, right, every day I'll carry on with this daily practice thing. And I did yoga, and I think I managed 120 days or something like that. And then I took a break, and I haven't done any for ages.
Yeah.
And I think the reason I haven't done it is it felt more like a chore than actually I believed that it was working towards something. Whereas I think with the daily practice with my art is I believe that it's worth me doing because it's making my life better. It's me doing what I want to do. It's pushing me towards being an artist, both externally being an artist, but being an artist in your own mind. And it's important because it's kind of living. You're forcing yourself to live your dream, almost.
Yeah. And we do have to force ourselves. And even if it
Yeah.
is something that we really love, or it's our dream, it's our main goal, still trying to achieve it. And yes, we have to force ourselves sometimes to do that in everything.
Absolutely.
So yeah, but that's really interesting that you've been successful in the daily practice in some things, and then others it's just like,
Not
no, it's
worked.
kind of it's gone by the wayside. Shall we
Yeah.
say from now? Do you think you'll
For
come
now.
back to it? I like
Yeah,
for now.
I think so. I think so. And I think um yeah, I think daily practice is a good habit maker, and it's a good thing to do, but it's easy to kind of slip out of the habit.
It is indeed. Really, this is an ongoing thing that you're excited and motivated to
Yeah.
do. And you've got that really brilliant way of displaying that what you've actually been doing, which is great, because so often stuff just goes in a plastic bag, it goes in a cupboard, it goes in a box, and well, or is that just me? Or my stuff
No,
stuck
it
in
does.
bags?
It does.
You don't see that progression.
No, and I think that's the difference. Whereas it started as something just to do every day, as to kind of as a solution against these projects that were taking months and months, and then it's morphed into being an artwork in its own right and having kind of a way of being displayed in its own right as well.
Yeah, no, I think that's lovely. Is having doing that, right? So we've quite a few things here to go back, and obviously I'll say I'm going to go back to them, and we won't because we're running out of time. What I wanted to bring back into context is what started you off stitching in the first place. If you want to just tell us maybe a little glimmer about your art world experience. You've been very, very involved in the art world, and now from what you've been telling me, you've like flipped the switch, and so now being an artist is more important than being involved in the art world. How did textiles get brought into all of this? Because I sense that the textiles is embedded in all of this story.
Yeah, so I think textiles has always been something that I've done. I suppose it comes from my family. My nan and my mum both used textiles as a hobby, and not particularly as an art form, but just as a craft, like a lot of people do.
Yeah,
sitting in front of the telly, doing a bit of knitting, a bit of cross stitching. So I learned how to knit, cross stitch. So tried to learn how to crochet, but that's just something that never clicked. So that's kind of always been a part of me and a part of my family. But then I went to university, did a degree in fine art, and used textiles within that, and that was kind of a point where I started to use textiles rather than as a craft, as an art form, and looking at how you can use the method to create artworks. And then did a master's in museum management, a PhD in the art market, like you do. Spent years researching into the art world, interviewing artists, lecturing on the art world, and then kind of my practice diminished a little bit. I don't think it ever went away, and I'll say it never went away, because even in my mind, I was thinking about artistic ideas I
In your
wanted to
mind, you
do.
were stitching, even though you maybe
Was,
wasn't actually
even though,
stitching.
yeah, I could go like 5 years and not make anything, but in my mind, I'd made loads of
Yeah.
stuff. Um,
Oh, do you know, I do that.
yeah, so I think like that artistic mindset was always there, but
Yeah,
other things always took over.
yeah.
So I was so like I say, I did a PhD, which takes over your entire life. I've worked, lectured on the art world. I've spoken at conferences. I've operated as an art dealer, buying and selling art. I've represented artists, done art fairs, hosted exhibitions, curated exhibitions, helped organisations get
Crikey.
funding. I know.
Making me feel like a complete fraud.
Oh,
Because
I've
I
worked.
am.
Not at all,
It's
not at all.
hilarious.
I worked as I did a lot in community art, so teaching people how to be creative.
Yeah.
Um, co-founded an arts venue, spent huge amount of time running that place, which I loved, and I enjoyed all of it.
Mm.
But I was never creatively satisfied, although I was involved in the arts and my life was kind of dictated by art. My creative urge was never fully satisfied.
Yeah, I can totally understand that because all of those things you're organising, you're helping others, you're talking about it. But probably, as you've already said, the one thing you wasn't doing was actually creating very much art.
Yeah, end of the day, when you've been doing all of these things, it's kind of you haven't got the mental capacity or the energy to actually spend doing it. So it projects might sit on a table for months, and I think like, yeah, I'll do that, yeah, I'll do that, and it never actually gets done. And then you think, oh yeah, I'm going to have a concerted effort, and you'll push at it for a couple of weeks, and then it'll be months and months, and before you do anything again. And I think so many people find that difficulty, and I think that was where daily practice became really important as a kind of way
Yeah,
to kind of make me prioritize my art. But it all changed, and pandemic was a big life-changing experience for everyone.
yeah, yeah.
But that was a point where I realized that actually what I'm doing is great, what I'm enjoying what I'm doing, but it's not really what I want. It's not really satisfying me. So I then decided, I didn't really decide what I was going to do until a bit later on. I decided to cut everything back. So I cut a lot of, I took a step back from a lot of things that I was doing, and then had a couple of months where it was like, right, I'm gonna do art. I'm gonna do art. And I decided there was stuff that I'd been doing in the past that was all very complicated and deep, and that I decided I didn't want to do art based around that. So it was like, well, so what do I want to make? And I'd gone through loads of different things, from painting pub signs to I decided I was going to paint landscapes. I live in the countryside in the UK, and I was going to paint countryside views, kind of like very constable oil paintings, really big. They were going to be amazing. I spent loads of money on oil paints and never painted anything. And then I kind of like thinking, like, I'm not even a painter anyway.
I could say, where did paint come into it all?
Oh no!
Oh, you were so absorbed in the art world, weren't you,
Oh,
Jack?
I was,
It's
and
all
then
this painting you'd been doing in your head.
oh, it was, yeah, and they looked amazing in my head. And then I got to a point where it's become quite a memorable thing for me. But I was walking the Southwest Coast path with my dad and my cousin,
Yeah.
and it was really hot. It was really steep, and I was thinking about what did I want to do, and I just thought to myself, why are you even thinking of all of these other things? All you need to do is just sew. That's what you enjoy the most.
Yeah.
That's where you feel comfortable. That's where your skills are. You know what you're doing when you're sitting at a sewing machine, just sew. So that's kind of where it all came about. And like when I got home from that holiday, I got my sewing machine out, cut some fabric, picked a thread, started sewing. And that's where it all came about. And then the ideas of the art came from the experience of sewing. I felt so much calmer when I was sewing. And then the whole practice emerged out of that. So textiles is an important part of it, because that's kind of the place creatively where I feel so calm and at home and comfortable, that was the natural place for my practice to sit.
Yeah. So while you were thinking about what to do and all the rest of it, the the realization that actually it was the stitching, it was the stitching that was the pivotal point, really, wasn't it, in all of that?
Yeah,
soul searching, artistic voice, all of those kind of things. The stitch finished up being the pivotal
the main thing. It did,
thing,
and it wasn't even like, so what am I going to stitch? Am I going to stitch a landscape? Am I going to stitch a portrait? There wasn't even that. It's no, just stitch. Just sit down and stitch. And I say just stitch, but and to people listening, it might sound like you just sat at a sewing machine one day and these things created. Stitching was always something that I'd done. I'd always felt really comfortable at a sewing machine. I taught machine embroidery. So I was very competent on a sewing machine anyway. The kind of the idiosyncrasies of broken needles, snapped threads, tangled threads, and all of that stuff didn't really bother me because I knew the process so well that I could just be absorbed in the kind of the experience of making it.
Right. And then obviously this is an audio podcast, so we're here, we're talking. So let's just dive in for a moment and paint a picture in Stitch of what your stitching is. So we've talked about the daily practice, of small items, 10 by 15. You're doing it in black thread on white, and you're using, a zigzag. Yeah. So the other work that you do, I mean, I've included some pictures as well, obviously, but do you want to just describe for us, Jack, the other art that you do aside from those daily stitchings?
So my main practice is abstract art that uses often just two colours, bold colours, and fully covers the fabric in stitch. So I pick a thread, cut a piece of fabric and start sewing. It's exceedingly dense stitching, so you can't see any background fabric at all. And it just becomes these kind of blocks of colour from a distance. And the two blocks of colour are often joined by quite a flowing and curved line that runs through the piece. And the colours can sometimes be contrasting. They can be quite similar, but from a distance, they look quite simple, where it's blocks of colour joined by a flowing line. But then when you get up close to them, the blocks of colour change into a really dense, complicated web of stitch where the stitches are winding in and out of each other and overlapping each other. So it's simplicity whilst embracing complexity.
You say it's complicated simplicity, isn't it? When you look at the close-ups, so how many layers of stitch have you got going on there? It's not one, is it? And it's not two. No, it's like 10, I don't know. There's layers and layers.
Huge amount of stitching. So I'm just going over and over and over, almost to the point where it's so thick that the needle won't go through it anymore.
There's the next, you must be using a denim needle or something to whack your way through that.
I use a jeans needle or a leather needle because they're a bit thicker and a bit sharper. And it's about they're just so dense that background fabric doesn't show through. And all it's about is that kind of block colour. And that's what absorbs your field of vision.
Now, one thing that I really love is how you've then, again, thought about how to display these. It looks like you've thought about how it was all going to be displayed before you've done them. Is that, there's one of the main pictures of you standing like leaning against a wall, and we've got this, is there about 11, 12 of these images sort of arranged in a circular blob? Was that designed before you did any stitching at all, or did that evolve, Jack? I'm quite intrigued by that.
Kind of the ideas usually evolve. So I do individual stitchings, which are just one-off stitchings. The design is just within that piece, standalone piece. And then occasionally I'll do a stitching and think there's more to say here. There's more. Although the stitching's finished, I'm not finished with this design. So then they morph into what I call collection pieces.
Right. Yes. So you have used that term.
Yeah. So which is where I use small individual stitchings that come together in either a grid or an offset pattern to create a large artwork with a design that flows through all of the stitchings. So it's made up of 9 to 12 stitchings or sometimes more, but the design is of one image, one abstract pattern.
Right.
They take a lot more planning because the lines have got to flow through from one piece to the next. It's got to take into account the optical illusion of the gaps between the stitching. So they take a lot more planning, but they come out of an individual stitching that feel that there was much more organic to start with.
Right. Yeah, because it was that aspect of, as you say, the gap in between the frames. And because if that's wrong, when you've got something like that, if it looks random, but it isn't, because if that gap's not right, our eyes tells us it's wrong.
It does.
See what I mean? It's like, oh God, I can see what he's doing, but there's just something wrong, and we don't know why there's something wrong. But it's usually because you say it's the perception and the perspective and all that kind of thing. Yeah.
And sometimes when I'm planning these out, I'll kind of use rulers and straight lines to draw things out, and I'll draw them out and plan them and think, no, that just doesn't look right. It doesn't look right at all. So then it's got to be planned so it looks right, even if it's not right.
Even if it's geometrically not correct. It has to look right.
They've just got to look right so that visually, when you look at the pieces, you're looking at the artwork and your eyes not being thrown off by one of these things. You're thinking, oh, I'm not quite sure.
Your brain's not going, no, that's not lined up properly. And not concentrating on what you're supposed to be doing. Your brain's off. So again, is that just me? Yeah.
No, but it is. But I think that's my practice generally is trying to is this balance between simplicity and complexity that I want my art to feel and look exceedingly simple, but actually behind it there's a huge amount of complexity to reach that simplicity.
Yeah.
And if that complexity wasn't there, that simplicity wouldn't be achieved.
Yes. Yeah, exactly. It's all what's the word? A paradox, isn't it? Really, a lot of this. Yeah. So the other thing you've said there that you are some of these collections there's a lot of planning goes into it.
Yeah.
And I'm intrigued as well, even with your daily stitch. So when you look at, you say you've got these like flowing, like organic shapes, basically in blocks of colour, and the appearance again is somewhat, it could be of, well, it's random, but human brains, although we think we're hopeless at being random. We can't do random. Human brains can't do random. So how do you, like, again, balance off that randomness with something that then isn't random at all? How's that evolved? So that fascinates me that we can't do random.
Yeah, I think there's two things that goes on. There's the randomness of the design and the randomness of the stitch. And obviously the randomness of the stitch is a lot more random because the machine's going up and down all the time. I'm moving the fabric in any which direction, which creates this total randomness that although I'm in control of which way I move the fabric, actually it is very random, because if I'm feeling a bit more anxious, I'll be moving it faster. If I'm really calm, I'll be moving it slower. If I'm putting my foot down on the machine, it's going faster. So that there's that with the actual stitch pattern is almost total randomness. But then there's the kind of the flowing forms within the stitchings, which perhaps are random, perhaps aren't random. There are reoccurring patterns that come back into my practice, and I know there are certain lines and forms for me that I really like. I could repeat time after time.
Yeah.
And then there are certain lines and forms that I just cannot cope with. They are just totally unbalanced. And I just, no matter how many times I do that type of stitching, it's like, no, that isn't working at all. It's got to change. So there are patterns within the randomness that are repetitive. Yeah, so there's repetition as well as randomness.
And I think I'll bring out that purposeful word again. So although you've got these brightly coloured block shapes going on there, again, I suppose it's back to this idea of balance, isn't it? Because then you've, to counterbalance those things, you've made some purposeful decisions about other aspects of that artwork, haven't you?
I have. So there's lots of structure. Structure, perhaps not the right word. Perhaps purposeful decision is a better way of putting it. There's lots of decision making that has been made over a number of years, and some of it is for specific reasons, other is less so. So all of the art is the same size. Well, three sizes. There's a small one, a medium one, and a large one. But within that, they're all the same size. All of the art is rectangular. All of the stitchings are mounted onto a plywood board, which then gets float mounted onto a bigger black stained board. There's never any glass between the art and the viewer. So there's lots of decisions and there's lots of structure to my art, which gives a certain style, which I think becomes recognizable. So then within the actual stitching, I can use any color, I can use any pattern, but there's these structures, these decisions that help. I think they're there for a number of reasons. One, they give a style, but two, they help me to be creative. That just if I just got a pair of scissors out and I could cut any shape and I could do anything and I could mount it in any way, the options are just too big. Whereas starting sewing, if I'm starting a new piece, I know that all I need to do is it a small, medium, or a large? I'll pick the size, I'll cut the fabric, and all I need to do is pick one coloured thread. And once I pick the size and pick the one coloured thread, I can just embrace sewing. And then I'm embracing sewing. I'm letting myself flow. So these structures and these decisions are there, but they're there to help my creativity emerge and to stop my overthinking brain overthinking.
I just absolutely love this, because I'm just sitting there thinking about, I don't often, again, I'm trying to prioritize more of my time on some creativity instead of sitting at a damn computer. And quite often I know, I think, right, I've got this idea in my head. So then you I get this idea and then you start fiddling around trying to plan it. And I hate planning things like that. I'm useless at it. And it's it's just another barrier. Then it's right, now I have to go rooting around and what fabric and what, and you've hit the nail on the head. And I hadn't actually thought about it in those ways, because, and then it's it's an hour now and I haven't done anything.
You've lost your momentum then,
now I've got to pack it away. I'll go and do some, and it's
yeah, but I think you've used the perfect word there. It's barriers, and it's what these things do. Not only do they allow me to display my art in a way that is very me, that allows me to do things. So I don't want glass to be between the viewer and the artwork. I want my art to be projected off the wall. The blackboard gives it separation from anything around. So there's lots of thinking that goes on. But actually, these decisions that I've made over time within my practice eliminate a lot of those barriers to creativity. I'm not planning out artworks. I'm not, so when I'm doing just an individual stitching, I'm not planning the artwork. I'm not having to think about what I'm doing. All I'm doing is cutting the fabric, picking a thread and sitting down and sewing.
On with it. I've
already made the decision about what stitch I'm using. I'm using a zigzag stitch. So that a lot of these decisions have been made, and then all I need to do is allow my creativeness to flow whilst I'm sewing. And all of those decisions have been made. And in that moment of sewing, I can just be calm, relaxed, and just embrace it and let the creativity flow.
I just feel as if I've got this light bulb, and suddenly it's really made sense. One of you do mostly hand embroidery, and I've got awful eyesight anyway, and I've just finding I'm getting sick of hunching over, peering at it. I've been working on a keyboard for 37 years or something. My hand's starting to hurt. So I've reevaluated, is this actually an enjoyable hobby when I'm getting neck ache and peering at it and makes my hand hurt? So I thought, get your sewing machine out. So I'm actually following and some structure. Again, it's back to structure, Jack, is that structure. And I'm following a self-paced online course with the Embroidery Guild, Foundations on Machine Embroidery. And so, you get an exercise. And so I have really enjoyed making little samples for that very reason. It's right, I've got an hour. I'm going to sit down, do this exercise, do this sample, have a go at this thing, which, I've probably done years ago but now I'm going to do it again, properly. I'll think about it in a different way. And I've got this pile of things I've done, and it's woohoo, because otherwise, months of this thing doing hand embroidery and not getting started, or, it makes me ache, so I just don't do it anymore. Yeah. And you've just really shone a light bulb there on how helps me now to be able to focus on more of my creativity, because I've realised I have been putting barriers in my way. So thank you for that, Jack.
It's true.
I've got a lot about this conversation. I'm sure everybody else has. Thank you. Yeah.
I've literally lived it, because I've had those barriers stopping me being creative for so many years, that I've had a busy life with other things, that I've been doing other things, and then you come to sit down, right, I've got an hour, I'm going to make something, and you're thinking like, oh my God, the pressure, what am I going to make? I don't know what to make. I've got 30 minutes left and I've still not made anything. And then it's like it just gets rid of all of that pleasure.
Yeah, it does.
And I think that part of me embracing my practice is making the kind of the barriers to entry into the creativity and allowing those creative urges just to flow, has been making just to try and make the entrance into starting and getting yourself into that flow state come as easy as possible.
Yeah. You've really, really hit the nail on the head with that. And even, so many people who haven't really started, or when I go to like exhibitions and stuff, you can hear people going, oh, I wouldn't know where to start. Oh, I could never do that. So they've already put a barrier up in their head before they even started, like, oh, everyone's expert, not really recognizing the fact that the person who's created that an amazing piece of work might have been stitching for 30 years or something. So, you can't do that yet, because you haven't put those 30 years of stitching time into it. But I can't draw, and all these other barriers. And so I'm really, even with these, these online courses, is to really help people to just focus on that sample. It's not the Sistine Chapel ceiling. It's a sample of what you did that afternoon in that half hour. And, you've really embodied that approach, I think, Jack.
And just embracing it whilst you're sat there and doing it and enjoying it, because no one has to make art. It's you choose to do it.
So let's enjoy it.
Yeah, for me, it's this urge that I feel so much more contented once I've done it. But it's helping you along that process so that creative urge can come out in its most natural way.
So, given all of this, and you've again been very purposeful in like flipping, the amount of time you were spending not doing your art. Now you've flipped it, and that's the majority. That's the focus, isn't it, for you now? So I suppose in some respects, I quite often ask people about high points. So to me, it seems the high point has been that flip, using the stitch to flip. Absolutely.
And that prioritizing the practice, and the actually now, if I get an email from someone asking me to kind of be involved in something, it very much depends if I've got time around my practice. So rather than my practice fitting in with everything else, it's actually other things have got to fit in around my practice. So that mental change is absolutely enormous. It's been a long time to get to it, but it's an enormous change, which is, and it's not something that happens overnight, and you don't actually recognize that change. But getting to a point where that is the priority is an enormous high point.
Yeah, it's one of those things that sounds so damn obvious.
Yeah.
And it sounds so simple, but it's anything but easy. And again, you can apply that into how you develop your business, how you focus on sport, or any of those activities. It's very much a case of, if you have a dream, if you have a goal that you want to achieve, then when you decide that's what you're doing, what you also have to decide is what you're going to say no to. And that's where a lot of people fall down, in that they've made that positive decision, but what they haven't recognized is the thing that's going to make it work is saying no pretty much to everything else.
Absolutely.
And that is such a challenge, is the saying no bit.
It is a challenge, and it takes a lot of saying yes and then not regretting it, but thinking afterwards.
Thinking, why am I doing this?
Yeah, perhaps thinking I should be sewing, but I'm not. Instead, I'm doing it. Where it takes a number of those things for you to actually think to realize that. So it is a flicking between the two to actually over time to then realize what is the priority and what you need to prioritize.
Yeah, for sure. Now, I think we just touched on it a bit. So when I was asking you about how you'd, textiles has always been there, but yeah, you've kind of put it to one side. And you said that you'd always been creating, you'd always been always been stitching and so on. Now, sometimes just for a laugh, I do ask people about unfinished objects or things that they've done and hasn't seen the light of day. So now it seems to me, if you've got your daily practice, perhaps you don't have those, or do you? Do you have things lurking around in the background that you might not see the light of day? Yeah.
In my current practice, they don't exist at all. That actually there is nothing. So it's about the experience. So
that's the whole point, isn't it? Making the thing. Yeah.
If it doesn't feel right or balanced, I'll just keep working it until it does feel right and balanced. If that might sometimes mean getting the scissors and cutting it and hacking it apart and then reworking it, but it's never kind of put in a cupboard. However,
I knew there was some.
However, when I was doing my PhD was all about the value of art, the multiple values of art. So the economic value, the social value, the cultural value, the different values of art, the art market, the different people involved in the art market, and all of this complexity. And I was making art about it at the time. Not much art, but I was making art about it at the time.
Yeah.
And it was very deep. It was very complicated. Some of it was textiles, some of it was pen and ink drawings, some of it was text-based art. It was kind of a total mixture. And I enjoyed the process, but actually the art was so deep and complicated that it needed a reading list to go with each piece. It needed an essay to explain what it was meaning. It needed all of this philosophical paradigm to go behind it and all of that rubbish.
Oh, that's a joy killer to start off with, isn't it?
So that's all sat in a plan chest.
Yeah.
I do think one day I might come back to it and I might do something with it. But at the minute, my practice has been very much about cutting all of the complexity away and simplifying things.
Understand now, giving us that little backstory, the joy and pleasure.
Yeah, it was too complicated before. It was far too complicated. But I think that was a critical part of the journey.
It was part of the journey, wasn't it? If you hadn't have gone through that, you wouldn't be where you are now with the simplicity and the balance and the the more kind of joyful creativity with it all.
Absolutely. Yeah. So yes, it's not been thrown in the bin, and it's sat in a plan chest, and it might reappear one day.
Do you think you might get it out and just sit in front of your machine, pick a colour and just go and zigzag all over the top of it?
Maybe.
Would that feel brilliant?
I don't know. It feels like an unfinished part. It feels that kind of that previous practice. It does feel unfinished.
I feel it needs zigzagging.
Yeah, it might zigzag it. That might be the solution.
Do us a favour, Jack. Get one bit out and just zigzag it and see how you feel.
I will.
Oh, dearie me. Right. Well, I say this every damn time. It's just we could be sat here talking for a whole week because this is absolutely fascinating. I've probably missed out a million and one things that I did want to highlight. I think you really brought it home that we don't have to have everything so damn complicated. And the power, and it is very powerful, of things just building up one step. It's like, again, back to anything, no matter what it is that you're creating or in business or creating courses and stuff that I try and help people with. It's one step. And so you have basically you found a way, haven't you, a path that you can also, if you want to, you can scale up and create big work out of small pieces because of all those decisions that you've already made. So that's come across very strikingly for me. I really am just going to thank you very much for shedding that light bulb.
No, it's been great to talk about it.
Let's not make everything so damn complicated.
No, for me, there's constantly this licking between complexity and simplicity, and things will go more complicated, and then I'll have to kind of look at it and think, no, why are you making it complicated?
Bring it back.
Simplify it, bring it back. So there is that.
Actually, that's just reminded me of simplicity. So I was like laughing to myself a bit. I think I'd seen must be a reel or something where there you were with your, I thought, has he just got the staple gun out and he's like whacking that onto it? Is that just plywood? And there you are going, yeah. So that actually, again, I thought the way in which you handle and display your work is also quite refreshing because, I mean, yes, there's certain hand embroidery and people have spent hundreds and hundreds of hours and it needs to be on archival, everything. And there's beautiful ways of doing it.
Yeah.
And me personally, I don't all throw darts at me, everybody. I just can't be bothered with any of that. So again, it was lovely to see you there with the drill out, the staple gun.
Yeah.
And I'm not dismissing and I'm not minimizing it. And it's just like, it was a refreshing way that you treat your artwork in the way in which you wanted to display it in a certain way, etc., without again getting bogged down in the embroidery mounting police rules.
Yeah, and although I
everyone.
spend all my day stitching, I hate hand stitching. I haven't got the time for hand stitching. I haven't got the patience for it. And the thought of kind of lacing the back of it in a beautiful way. It's like, oh yeah, I'm sure it'd look great and it'd pull it in and it'd pull all the wrinkles out. But I haven't got that would just take a lot of the joy out of the process.
It's not needed for what you're doing, is it?
Not
think,
at all.
Really.
And actually, the what I'm doing works, and there obviously are the parts of the process that are hidden. So obviously, the board is wood is acidic. That doesn't do well for fabric. So there's barrier paper between the two. So that
there we are. Thank you.
There's these hidden things that you don't see. But it's finding your own way within it. And just because there are certain rules and conventions doesn't mean you have to follow them.
Yes. And I think that's a really brilliant way in which to end. So I'm glad I remembered that thing about the framing. I know there's something else I just wanted to throw in there. So so we that's just, I think, a really great place to end. So I mean, usually people have got exhibitions and books and future things. Have you? What's your future plans, Jack?
My future plans are to not think about it more than what I'm doing today. So I'm sewing and stuff will happen and people will come with opportunities will arise and the whole thing will build as it has done for the last few years.
Brilliant. Keep on keeping on then, really.
Absolutely.
Jack.
Keep on sewing.
Yeah. Well, I can't tell you enough how enjoyable this has been, even just personally for me. So thank you, Jack. I really, really appreciate your time today. And I've had a real good time chatting with you as well. Good. And I'm sure everybody will find this quite liberating in many ways. So
great. I'm glad you've enjoyed it.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Jack.
My pleasure.
If you enjoyed this episode and want to hear more, then please join the Stitchery Stories fan club so you can get an email when a new episode is released. It's a quick and easy way of listening and of keeping up with any news and information around this podcast. Please visit stitcherystories.com. Of course, you can listen to Stitchery Stories on plenty of podcast apps at Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify and plenty more besides. You can also ask your smart speaker to play Stitchery Stories podcast too. But wherever you listen, why not leave us a rating and a review to encourage other people to listen too? I very much appreciate you taking the time to do that for me. So that is the end of our Stitchery story for today. Keep stitching, keep smiling, and keep creating your very own Stitchery Stories.